For 20 years, I scrubbed toilets, washed dishes, and cleaned floors for $12 an hour. I never complained. I never asked for more. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang and a lawyer said 5 words that stopped my heart. Mr. Henderson left you everything. $2.3 million. To me, the maid. But what happened next, nobody could have predicted. This is my story. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you appreciate stories about real women, real struggles, and real triumphs, please hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world to me. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Keisha Williams, and for 20 years, I was invisible. Not literally, of course. People saw me. They saw the black woman in the plain blue uniform pushing a vacuum cleaner. They saw the hands scrubbing their toilets, folding their laundry, preparing their meals. But they didn't see me. They didn't see the woman who dreamed, who worried, who loved fiercely, and hoped desperately for something better. $12 an hour. That's what I made for 2 decades of my life. Let me take you back to the beginning, to October 15th, 2003. I was 38 years old, standing outside a massive Tudor-style house in the wealthy suburb of Brookhaven, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I had 2 kids at home. Marcus was 14, and little Shayna was only 9. Their father had left us 3 years earlier, and I was drowning in bills I couldn't pay. With prayers, I couldn't stop praying. The agency had called me that morning. Emergency placement, they said. Elderly widower needs someone immediately. $60 a day, 5 days a week. $60. I did the math in my head. That was $12 an hour for a 5-hour shift. It wasn't much, but it was something. And something was better than the nothing I had. I rang the doorbell, smoothing down my uniform for the 100th time. The door opened, and there he was, Mr. Charles Henderson, 72 years old, silver-haired with the kind of tired eyes that told stories of recent grief. His white shirt was wrinkled, his cardigan had a stain on the sleeve, and he looked at me like a man lost at sea seeing land for the first time. "You must be Mrs. Williams," he said softly. "Yes, sir, but please, call me Keisha." He nodded, stepping aside. "Keisha it is. I'm afraid the house is quite a mess. My wife, Eleanor, she passed 6 weeks ago, and I haven't been able to—" He cracked his voice and cleared his throat. "I haven't been able to manage." I walked into that house, and my heart broke a little. Dishes piled in the sink, dust covering every surface, laundry overflowing from baskets. But it wasn't the mess that got to me. It was the framed photographs everywhere. A beautiful woman with kind eyes smiled from every room. Eleanor, his wife for 47 years. "Mr. Henderson," I said gently, "you just point me in the right direction and I'll take care of everything. You don't worry about a thing." That first day, I worked for 7 hours instead of 5. I didn't ask for extra pay. When I left, the kitchen gleamed, the floors shone, and I'd prepared a simple dinner and left it in the refrigerator with reheating instructions. Mr. Henderson tried to pay me more, but I refused. "You pay me what we agreed," I told him firmly. "I don't take what isn't mine." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Keisha, truly." I didn't know it then, but that moment, that choice to see his humanity instead of an opportunity, would change my life forever. The routine became sacred. Every weekday morning, I'd drop Marcus and Shayna at school, then drive my beat-up Honda Civic to Brookhaven. I'd arrive at 6 in the morning, and Mr. Henderson would already be awake, sitting in his study reading the newspaper. I'd make his coffee, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, always in the blue mug Eleanor had given him, and he'd thank me like I'd handed him gold. Over the weeks, then months, then years, something shifted. Mr. Henderson started talking to me. Really talking. Not the way employers talk to their help, but the way lonely people talk to someone who actually listens. He told me about Eleanor, how they'd met at a library in 1956, how she'd been reaching for the same book of Yeats poetry.
He told me about his children, Richard and Patricia, both successful and busy and living far away with their own families. He told me about his career as an architect, the buildings he'd designed, the dreams he'd built with his own hands. And slowly, carefully, I began to share too. I told him about Marcus's straight-A report cards, about Shayna's love for drawing, about the scholarship applications I was filling out at midnight when my body ached from cleaning all day. I told him about the second job I'd taken, cleaning for Mrs. Patterson 3 evenings a week, just to make ends meet. He listened. God, he really listened. "You're raising those children right, Keisha," he'd say. "Eleanor would have loved meeting them." There were moments, small ones, that built into something bigger. The day Marcus got accepted to community college, Mr. Henderson slipped me an envelope with $500. For his textbooks, he insisted when I tried to refuse. The Christmas when Shayna needed glasses and I didn't know how I'd afford them, he handled it, quietly, without fanfare. "You've given me 20 years of dignity," he said once, when I tried to thank him for paying for Shayna's glasses. "Let me give you a little back." 20 years. People at church asked me why I stayed. Other maids I knew were making $15, even $18 an hour at newer houses. The agency called with better offers. But I couldn't leave. Mr. Henderson wasn't just my employer anymore. He was my friend. Maybe the best one I'd ever had. I watched him age. Slowly at first, then faster after he turned 85. His hands shook when he held his coffee. His steps became shuffling and uncertain. 2 years ago, his doctor diagnosed him with congestive heart failure. I started arriving earlier, staying later, never adjusting my hours on the timesheet. Richard and Patricia visited maybe 3 times a year. They'd breeze in with their expensive clothes and expensive problems, stay for a few hours, then disappear back to their expensive lives. Mr. Henderson never complained, but I saw the disappointment in his eyes every time they left. "You're here more than they are," he said to me one afternoon, his voice weak. "Someone's got to make sure you're taking your medications on time," I replied, adjusting his pillows. He smiled at me, and I saw something in his face I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes, but something deeper. Something like love. Not romantic, but the kind of love that grows between two souls who truly see each other. 3 months ago, he got worse. The doctors said his heart was failing. He spent more time sleeping, less time in his study. I'd sit with him sometimes, just holding his hand, telling him stories about Marcus's new job as a teacher, about Shayna's nursing program. "You raised them well, Keisha. Eleanor was right about you." "Right about me? Mr. Henderson, she never met me." He smiled mysteriously. "Didn't she?" I didn't understand. Not then. The last time I saw him was on a Monday. He was tired, so tired, but he held my hand and said, "Thank you for everything, Keisha, for seeing me as a person, not just a paycheck. That's rarer than you know." "You did the same for me, Mr. Henderson," I replied, tears in my eyes. He squeezed my hand and promised you'd take care of yourself. Promise me you let yourself be happy. I promise. That Friday, I was at my second job, on my hands and knees scrubbing Mrs. Patterson's kitchen floor. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I should have known. I should have felt something, but I didn't. I just answered the phone and heard the words that would shatter my world and rebuild it all at once. "Ms. Williams, this is attorney David Morrison. I'm calling about Mr. Charles Henderson. I'm afraid he passed away 3 days ago, and we need to discuss his will."
The floor beneath my knees was cold, hard tile. Mrs. Patterson's kitchen floor. Beige with little brown flecks, the grout stained no matter how hard I scrubbed. I'd been working on the same spot for 10 minutes, my rubber gloves squeaking against the surface when my phone rang. I almost ignored it. Mrs. Patterson didn't like me taking calls during work hours, even though I was only paid for the time I actually worked. But some whisper in my spirit made me peel off my gloves and check the screen. Unknown number, area code 404. Local. "Hello?"
I answered, pressing the phone between my shoulder and ear as I wrung out my scrub brush. Is this Miss Keisha Williams? A man's voice. Professional. The kind of voice that wore expensive suits and had a secretary. Yes, this is she. Who's calling? Miss Williams. My name is David Morrison. I'm an attorney with Morrison and Associates. I'm calling regarding Mr. Charles Henderson. My heart stopped. Just completely stopped beating for what felt like an entire minute. Mr. Henderson? Is he okay? Is he in the hospital? The words tumbled out in a rush. I'd just seen him on Monday, just 3 days ago. He was tired, yes, but he'd been tired for months. He'd smiled at me, squeezed my hand, said thank you. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the kind of pause that crushes you before the words even come. Miss Williams, I am very sorry to inform you that Mr. Henderson passed away on Wednesday evening. The funeral was held privately yesterday, per his wishes. The scrub dash fell from my hand and clattered against the tile. The sound echoed in my ears, mixing with the roaring of my own blood. No, I whispered. No, that's not. Nobody called me. Nobody told me. I should have been there. I understand this is difficult, Attorney Morrison continued, his voice softening slightly. Mr. Henderson left very specific instructions about notifications. I'm calling because you're named in his will, and we need to schedule a time for you to come to our office to discuss the details. I barely heard him. Mr. Henderson was dead. Gone. The man who'd been part of my daily life for 20 years, who'd known my children's names and their birthdays, who'd listened to my stories and shared his own, he was gone. And I hadn't even known. I hadn't been able to hold his hand one last time. Miss Williams? Are you still there?
I'm here, I managed, my voice cracking. You said I'm in his will? Yes, ma'am. You're actually the primary beneficiary. I really think this conversation would be better in person. Would you be available to come to my office tomorrow at 10 o'clock? Primary beneficiary. The words didn't make sense. Mr. Henderson had children, Richard and Patricia, grandchildren, a whole family. I was just the maid, just the woman who cleaned his house and made his coffee and...
Miss Williams?
Yes, I'll be there. What's the address? He gave me the information, and I wrote it on the back of my hand with a pen from my cleaning caddy because I couldn't find paper and my brain wasn't working right. When I hung up, I just sat there on Mrs. Patterson's kitchen floor, my phone still in my hand, tears streaming down my face. Mrs. Patterson found me like that 20 minutes later. She wasn't unkind about it. She let me leave early without docking my pay. But I could see the curiosity in her eyes when I told her someone had died. She didn't ask who. I was grateful for that. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Marcus and Shayna were both out, Marcus at work, Shayna at her nursing clinical, so the apartment was empty when I walked in. Small mercies. I sat on my worn couch and let myself fall apart. I cried for Mr. Henderson, for the goodbye I never got to say. I cried for Eleanor, who he was finally with again. I cried for myself, for the loneliness that was already creeping in, the hole that would be left in my daily routine. Who would I make coffee for now? Who would listen to my stories about my kids? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows from the streetlight dance across the cracks in the plaster. My mind kept circling back to Attorney Morrison's words, primary beneficiary. What did that mean? Maybe Mr. Henderson had left me something small, maybe his collection of Yeats poetry, or perhaps a little money, enough to cover a month's rent. God knows I could use it. The Honda needed new brakes, and Shayna's textbooks for next semester were going to cost a fortune. But primary beneficiary? That seemed too much. That seemed like... No, I pushed the thought away. Rich people didn't leave their fortunes to their maids. That was fantasy. That was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not in real life. Not to women like me. I must have finally dozed off around 4 in the morning because the next thing I knew, my alarm was screaming at me and pale sunlight was creeping through my curtains. Tuesday, the meeting with attorney Morrison. I called in sick to my morning job, Mr. Henderson's house, the one I'd never clean again, and told the agency I needed a few days off. Then I stood in front of my closet, staring at my meager collection of clothes. What do you wear to find out what a dead man left you in his will?
I settled on my church outfit, a navy blue dress with a white collar, sensible black flats, and the pearl earrings Shayna had given me for my birthday 2 years ago. Fake pearls, but they looked real enough. I wanted to look respectable, dignified. I wanted Mr. Henderson to be proud of me, wherever he was. Morrison and Associates was in a sleek glass building downtown, the kind of place where the lobby had marble floors and abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary. I felt small walking through those doors, my reflection staring back at me from every shiny surface. The receptionist, a young white woman with perfect makeup and a perfectly pressed blouse, smiled at me with the kind of politeness that didn't reach her eyes. "Can I help you?" "I have an appointment with Attorney Morrison, Keisha Williams." She checked her computer, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe? Or recognition. "Of course, Mrs. Williams. Please have a seat. He'll be right with you." I sat in one of the leather chairs, so soft, so expensive, and folded my hands in my lap. Around me, important-looking people in suits hurried past with briefcases and important expressions. I didn't belong here. I knew it, and I was certain they knew it too. "Miss Williams?" I looked up to see a man in his 50s, gray at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. Attorney Morrison. He extended his hand, and I shook it, noting the firmness of his grip, the wedding ring on his finger, and the genuine warmth in his eyes. "Thank you for coming. Please follow me to my office." His office was all dark wood and leather-bound books, with a massive desk that looked like it weighed more than my car. He gestured to a chair across from his desk, and I sat, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. "Miss Williams, may I call you Keisha?" "Yes, sir." "Keisha, I'm going to be direct with you, because I believe that's what you deserve." He pulled out a folder, thick with papers, and opened it carefully. Mr. Henderson was a client of mine for over 30 years. He updated his will 14 months ago, and he was very, very specific about his wishes. My heart was pounding again, thundering. "He spoke about you often," Morrison continued, looking at me over his glasses. "He told me you'd been with him for 20 years, that you were the most loyal, kind, and genuine person he ever known, that you treated him like a human being when his own children barely remembered to call." Tears pricked my eyes. I blinked them back. "Keisha, Mr. Henderson's estate has been valued at approximately $3.1 million. This includes his home, his investments, his savings, and various other assets." 3 million. The number was so big it didn't feel real. It felt like monopoly money, play money, not something that existed in my world. His... There must be a mistake, I finally managed. "Mr. Henderson has children, grandchildren. I was just his housekeeper." Attorney Morrison smiled gently. "Keisha, you were far more than that to him. He made that very clear." He pulled out an envelope from the folder, cream-colored, expensive paper, my name written on it in Mr. Henderson's shaky handwriting. "He left you this letter. He wanted you to read it after I explained the inheritance." I took the envelope with trembling hands, but I couldn't open it yet, not while my world was spinning off its axis. "His children," Morrison continued, "have been notified. I expect they'll contest the will. They've already retained counsel. But I want you to know that Mr. Henderson anticipated this. He had a psychiatric evaluation done to confirm his mental competency. He left a video testimony explaining his reasons. Legally, this will is airtight. Contest the will. Richard and Patricia, they'd hate me. They probably already did. Why? Why would he do this? Attorney Morrison leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. He told me once that you gave him 20 years of dignity, that while his children gave him money and obligation, you gave him respect and genuine companionship. He said you treated him like a father when his own children treated him like an inconvenience. The tears came then, hot and fast, streaming down my face. I didn't try to stop them. He wanted you to have a better life, Keisha. He wanted you to stop working yourself to the bone for $12 an hour. He wanted your children to have opportunities. And more than anything, he wanted to say thank you for seeing him, really seeing him, all those years. I sat in that expensive office chair, in that expensive building, and I cried for the man who changed my life twice. Once when he hired me, and once when he left me everything. $2.3 million. It was more money than I'd made in my entire lifetime. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. It was freedom, security, a future that didn't involve scrubbing floors at 58 years old. But all I wanted was one more morning, making coffee in that blue mug, one more conversation, one more chance to say thank you. And goodbye.
I didn't open Mr. Henderson's letter in Attorney Morrison's office. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly, and somehow it felt wrong, too private, too sacred, to read his final words to me in front of a stranger, even one as kind as Morrison seemed to be. Instead, I clutched that cream-colored envelope to my chest like it was made of gold and walked out of that marble lobby in a daze. I sat in my Honda Civic in the parking garage for 45 minutes, just breathing, just trying to make sense of what had just happened. $2.3 million. I said the number out loud, and it still sounded like a foreign language. When I finally got home, I locked myself in my bedroom and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were 2 sheets of paper, covered in Mr. Henderson's distinctive handwriting, shaky now, in his final months, but still unmistakably his. My dear Pisha, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've just learned something that's probably shocked you down to your bones. I can almost see your face, those wide eyes, that expression of disbelief. You're probably thinking this is all some terrible mistake. It's not. 20 years ago, a woman showed up at my door when I was drowning in grief. I'd just lost the love of my life, and I was certain I'd never feel human again. But you saw me, not my bank account, not my house, not what I could give you. You saw me, a lonely old man who needed someone to treat me with kindness. You never asked for more than what we agreed. You never manipulated or schemed. You simply showed up, day after day, year after year, and gave me something I didn't know I was starving for. Dignity, respect, genuine human connection. My children are good people, Keisha, but they got lost somewhere along the way. They love money more than they ever loved me. You loved me when there was nothing in it for you. This money, it's not charity, it's not pity. It's the only way I know to say thank you for giving me 20 years of purpose, for making me feel like a father when you asked advice about Marcus and Shayna, for making me feel like a friend when you shared your life with me. Live, Keisha. Really live. Stop breaking your back for people who don't see you. Buy yourself something beautiful. Help your children. And maybe, if you can, help other women like you. Women who work themselves to the bone and never get the recognition they deserve. You made my final years worth living. That's worth more than money. But money is all I have left to give. With all my love and gratitude, Charles Henderson. I read it 3 times, tears dripping onto the paper, smudging the ink,
Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and sobbed into my pillow until I had nothing left. The peace lasted exactly 6 days. On Monday morning, Attorney Morrison called. His voice was tense, professional, carefully neutral. Keisha, we need to talk. Richard and Patricia Henderson have officially filed a contest to their father's will. They're claiming undue influence and diminished mental capacity. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means they're arguing that you manipulated their father, that he wasn't in his right mind when he changed his will. They're asking the court to invalidate the current will and revert to an earlier version that left everything to them. But you said it was airtight. You said he had a psychiatric evaluation. And we'll use all of that in court. Keisha, I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. They're going to try to paint you as a gold digger, a manipulator. They're going to dig into every interaction you had with Charles. The media might get involved. Are you prepared for that? Was I prepared? I was a 58-year-old maid who still had $18 in her checking account because I hadn't been able to bring myself to touch the inheritance money. How could I be prepared for this? I didn't do anything wrong, I said quietly. I know that. Charles knew that. But we're going to have to prove it. I'll be in touch about depositions and court dates. In the meantime, don't speak to anyone about this case. Not Richard or Patricia, not reporters if they contact you. Nobody. Understood? Understood. But Morrison's warning came too late. That very afternoon, as I was cleaning Mrs. Patterson's house, because yes, I was still working, still scrubbing floors, still earning my $12 an hour, my phone exploded with messages. My pastor, Sister Keisha, people are talking. Call me. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Is it true what they're saying about you? A number I didn't recognize. This is Channel 7 News. We'd like comment on the Henderson estate case. And then the one that made my blood run cold. This is Patricia Henderson. We need to talk. Today. I called Marcus first. Baby, I need to tell you something. 20 minutes later, both my children were at my apartment. I sat them down on the couch and explained everything. The inheritance, the will contest, the storm that was coming. Marcus sat in stunned silence. Shayna cried. Mama, that's life-changing money, Marcus finally said. If I get to keep it, I replied bitterly. His children think I stole it from them. Did you? Shayna asked quietly. The question hit me like a slap. Baby, no. I never asked Mr. Henderson for anything. I know, Mama. I know. She grabbed my hand. But that's what people are going to ask. That's what they're already asking. She was right. By Wednesday, the whispers at church had turned to stares. People I'd known for years suddenly looked at me differently, some with admiration, some with suspicion, some with naked envy. Sister Beverly cornered me after Bible study. Keisha, honey, I know I love you, but people are saying, well, they're saying things about you and that old white man. My face burned. Mr. Henderson was my employer, that's all. A good man who was kind to me. I believe you, baby, but you know how people talk. Especially when a black woman comes to money, they'll try to tear you down. You be ready for that. I wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready? The deposition was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Morrison prepared me, drilling me with questions, teaching me how to answer clearly and calmly. They're going to try to rattle you, he warned. They're going to make insinuations. Don't take the bait. Richard and Patricia's lawyer was a shark in a $1,000 suit named Gerald Blackwood. He smiled at me across the conference table like a predator sizing up prey. Miss Williams, how would you characterize your relationship with Mr. Henderson? He was my employer. Just your employer? You spent 20 years with him, 5 days a week. That's more time than most marriages. I was his housekeeper. I cleaned his home and provided companionship. Companionship. Blackwood drew the word out slowly. Interesting choice of words. Did this companionship ever become inappropriate?
Attorney Morrison slammed his hand on the table. That's completely out of line and you know it. I'm simply trying to understand the nature of a relationship that resulted in a near total disinheritance of Mr. Henderson's biological children. I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. Mr. Henderson was a lonely man who needed someone to talk to. I listened. I cared. There was never anything inappropriate between us. Never. But you did accept money from him over the years, didn't you? Money beyond your agreed salary? He helped with my son's textbooks once, and my daughter's glasses. I tried to refuse both times. How convenient that you tried to refuse. Blackwood's smile was vicious. Miss Williams, isn't it true that you systematically isolated Mr. Henderson from his family? That you poisoned his mind against his own children? No, that's not true. Then explain to me why a man would leave millions to his maid and mere thousands to the children he raised. I looked him dead in the eye. Maybe you should ask why his children only visited 3 times a year, why they barely called, why I was the one holding his hand during his doctor's appointments while they were too busy with their own lives. The words hung in the air like smoke. Blackwood's smile faltered. Morrison squeezed my hand under the table. Round 1 to me. But I knew this was just the beginning. The real battle, the courtroom, the judge, the final verdict, was still to come. And Richard and Patricia Henderson weren't going to let their father's millions go without a fight.
The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I'd seen enough legal dramas on TV to imagine something grand. Mahogany panels, soaring ceilings, drama echoing off marble walls. But this was just a room. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, rows of wooden benches that creaked when you shifted your weight. Still, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to Attorney Morrison's office that first day, the fake pearls in my ears, my hair pulled back in a neat bun. Marcus sat behind me on one side, Shayna on the other. Their presence was the only thing keeping me upright. Across the aisle sat Richard and Patricia Henderson. I'd only met them a handful of times over the years, brief, awkward encounters when they'd breeze through their father's house with barely a glance in my direction. Richard was 53, tall and lean, with his father's silver hair but none of his warmth. Patricia was 49, sharp-featured and expensively dressed, her diamond earrings probably worth more than my car. They didn't look at me, not once. Their lawyer, Gerald Blackwood, looked at me plenty. He had the eyes of a man who enjoyed breaking people. All rise for the Honorable Judge Catherine Brennan. We stood. Judge Brennan was a black woman in her 60s, gray-haired and stern-faced, with reading glasses perched on her nose. She surveyed the courtroom with the expression of someone who'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. Be seated. Her voice was clipped, efficient. We're here today regarding the estate of Charles Matthew Henderson, deceased. Mr. Blackwood, you may proceed with your opening statement. Blackwood stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. Your Honor, this case is about a vulnerable elderly man who was systematically manipulated by an employee who saw an opportunity and took it. Over 20 years, Ms. Kesha Williams inserted herself into Mr. Henderson's life, isolated him from his family, and positioned herself to inherit a fortune that rightfully belongs to his biological children. My jaw clenched. Morrison touched my arm gently. Stay calm. The evidence will show, Blackwood continued, that Mr. Henderson's mental capacity was compromised in his final years, that he was lonely, grief-stricken, and susceptible to manipulation, that Miss Williams exploited these vulnerabilities for financial gain. He sat down, looking satisfied. Morrison rose slowly. He didn't have Blackwood's showmanship, but there was something solid about him, trustworthy. Your Honor, the evidence will show something very different. It will show a man of sound mind who made a deliberate, well-considered decision to leave his estate to someone who treated him with dignity and respect, someone who asked for nothing but gave everything. The evidence will speak for itself. Judge Brennan nodded. Mr. Blackwood, call your first witness. The next 2 hours were brutal. Blackwood called a parade of witnesses. Richard and Patricia, of course, who testified about their father's declining mental state. A doctor who'd seen Mr. Henderson once in the final year and noted some confusion. A neighbor who claimed I'd been overly familiar with Mr. Henderson. Each testimony felt like a knife. They painted me as a schemer, a predator. Patricia actually cried on the stand, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief as she talked about how her father wasn't himself in his final years. He forgot things, she said, her voice breaking. He'd call me by our mother's name sometimes. How could someone in that state make rational decisions about millions of dollars? When it was Morrison's turn to cross-examine, he was surgical. Miss Henderson, how often did you visit your father in his final year? Patricia hesitated. I visited as often as I could. I have a family of my own, responsibilities. How many times, Miss Henderson? 3, maybe 4 times. And how often did you call him? I don't see how that's relevant. Please answer the question. Once a month, sometimes less. We were both busy. Morrison nodded slowly. Ms. Williams visited your father 5 days a week for 20 years. She was there for every doctor's appointment in his final months. She made sure he took his medications, that he ate properly, that he had someone to talk to. Were you aware of this? She was paid to do those things, at $12 an hour. Your father was a multi-millionaire, Miss Henderson. If Miss Williams was truly the manipulative gold digger you claim, don't you think she would have negotiated a higher salary at some point in 2 decades? Patricia's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Morrison called his witnesses next. Mr. Henderson's primary care physician testified that, aside from his heart condition, Charles Matthew Henderson had been mentally sharp until the very end. The psychiatrist who'd evaluated him 14 months ago confirmed he'd shown no signs of dementia, confusion, or diminished capacity. Then, Morrison played the video. The bailiff dimmed the lights, and a screen lowered from the ceiling. There he was, Mr. Henderson, sitting in what looked like Morrison's office, wearing his favorite cardigan. The date stamp showed it was recorded 13 months ago, just after he'd changed his will. My throat tightened at the sight of him. God, I missed him. My name is Charles Matthew Henderson, he began, his voice clear and strong. I'm 79 years old, and I'm of sound mind and body. Well, sound mind anyway. My body's seen better days. A hint of his old humor. Despite everything, I smiled. I'm recording this because I know my children will contest my will. I know Richard and Patricia will be angry, hurt, confused. Maybe they'll think I've lost my mind, but I haven't. I want to explain why I'm leaving the bulk of my estate to Keisha Williams. He leaned forward slightly, looking directly into the camera. 20 years ago, Keisha walked into my house when I was drowning. My Eleanor had just died, and I wanted to die too. Everything felt meaningless. Then this woman showed up, and she didn't just clean my house. She gave me a reason to get up in the morning. My vision blurred with tears. She never asked me for a raise. Not once in 20 years. Do you know how rare that is? She could have demanded more money, threatened to leave, exploited my loneliness. She didn't. When her son needed textbooks, she was working 3 jobs to pay for them. I had to force her to accept help. When her daughter needed glasses, she was going without meals to save up. That's who Keisha Williams is. On the screen, Mr. Henderson's eyes glistened. My children, I love them. But they stopped seeing me as a person years ago. I became a duty, an obligation, a checkbook. Keisha saw me as a human being. She asked about my day. She listened to my stories.
She laughed at my jokes. She held my hand when I was scared. That's worth more than money. That's worth everything. He paused, collecting himself. Richard, Patricia, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't the father you needed. I'm sorry you grew up to value wealth over relationships, but I can't reward you for abandoning me. I won't. Keisha earned every penny I'm leaving her, not through manipulation or schemes, but through simple, consistent, genuine kindness. The world needs more people like her, and she deserves a life where she doesn't have to scrub floors at 58 years old. The screen went dark. The courtroom was silent. Dead silent. I looked across the aisle. Patricia was crying. Really crying now. Not for show. Richard's face was stone, but his hands were clenched into fists. Judge Brennan removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly. When she spoke, her voice was measured. I've seen a lot of will contests in my time on the bench. Many of them involve genuine concerns about capacity or undue influence. This is not one of those cases. She looked at Richard and Patricia. Your father was a competent adult who made a choice. Whether you agree with that choice is immaterial. The law is clear. She turned to me, and for the first time, her expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Miss Williams, it's evident from the testimony and evidence that you provided exceptional care for Mr. Henderson, that you did so without expectation of reward. The will is valid, properly executed, and reflects the clear intent of the deceased. The contest is denied. The gavel came down. It was over. Morrison squeezed my shoulder. Behind me, Shayna let out a sob of relief. Marcus wrapped his arms around both of us. I looked across the aisle one more time. Richard was already standing, straightening his tie, ready to leave. But Patricia was looking at me. Really looking at me. Maybe for the first time ever. I'm sorry, she mouthed. I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start. As we filed out of the courtroom, Morrison handed me a folder. It's done, Keisha. The estate will be transferred within 30 days. You're officially a wealthy woman. $2.3 million. It was real now. Finally, impossibly real. But as I walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight, my children on either side of me, I realized something.
Mr. Henderson had given me more than money. He'd given me proof that I mattered, that my life had value, that 20 years of showing up, caring, being present, it all meant something. And that was worth more than any inheritance. 6 months after the judge's gavel fell, I stood in front of Mr. Henderson's grave on a crisp spring morning. The headstone was simple, elegant, just his name, his dates, and the words Eleanor had chosen for her own stone 40 years ago. Love never ends. I placed fresh flowers at the base, yellow roses, his favorite, and sat down on the grass, not caring that the morning dew would stain my jeans. Well, Mr. Henderson, I said softly, I bet you're wondering what I did with all that money. The wind rustled through the oak trees overhead, and I smiled, imagining his curiosity. That gentle way he'd lean forward when he wanted to hear a story. First thing I did? I didn't quit. Not right away. You taught me that finishing what you start matters. So I gave Mrs. Patterson 2 weeks' notice. I cleaned every house on my schedule one last time, and I cleaned them better than I ever had before. I left those places spotless. I traced my fingers over his name on the stone. Then I paid off Marcus's student loans. All of them. He cried, Mr. Henderson. My grown son, 28 years old, cried like a baby when I told him. He's a full-time teacher now, 4th grade, and he doesn't have to drive for Uber on weekends anymore.
And Shayna, she's graduating nursing school this month, debt-free. She's going to help people, just like you knew she would. A jogger passed by on the cemetery path, and I waited until the footsteps faded. I bought a house. Nothing crazy. 3 bedrooms, a little yard, a porch where I can sit and drink my morning coffee. It's mine, Mr. Henderson. Paid in full. Nobody can take it from me. I wake up every morning and I still can't believe it. But this was the part I'd come to tell him. The part that mattered most. I started a foundation. Called it the Henderson Legacy Fund. I pulled out the brochure from my purse, even though he couldn't see it, and held it up like I was showing him. We give college scholarships to children of domestic workers, maids, janitors, housekeepers, kids whose parents work just as hard as I did, for just as little money. We've given out 15 scholarships so far. Full rides, Mr. Henderson. 4 years of tuition, room, board, books, everything. My voice cracked slightly. But that's not all. We started workshops too. Financial literacy classes for working women, teaching them about savings, investments, retirement, things I never knew until I met with your financial advisor. We're showing women like me that they don't have to work until they drop dead, that they have value beyond their labor. I thought about the first workshop we'd held, 30 women packed into a community center meeting room, most of them black and brown, all of them exhausted from work, all of them hungry to learn. The way their eyes had lit up when they realized they could build wealth, even on modest incomes, even at $12 an hour.
Your children came around, eventually. Well, sort of. I laughed softly. Patricia called me 3 months ago, apologized for everything. We had coffee. It was awkward, but it was something. She donated $50,000 to the foundation. I think she finally understood what you were trying to tell her. Richard hadn't apologized, probably never would. But that was okay. Some people needed to hold on to their anger, and I couldn't fix that. I still work, Not cleaning houses, I'm done with that. But I volunteer at the foundation 3 days a week, and I mentor young women, girls from the neighborhood who need someone to tell them they're worth something, that their dreams matter. I pulled out the letter, his letter, the one he'd left me, now creased and soft from being read 100 times. I read this every week, when I'm tired, when I doubt myself, when I forget why I'm doing all of this. You told me to live, Mr. Henderson, to really live. I'm trying. I'm finally trying. A tear rolled down my cheek, and I wiped it away. I drive a decent car now. Nothing fancy, a reliable Honda, but newer than the one I had. I buy myself fresh flowers every week. I take Shayna and Marcus out to dinner at nice restaurants where I don't have to check the prices on the menu. Little things. Beautiful things. The kind of life you wanted me to have. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting slightly. I was still 58 after all, and 20 years of scrubbing floors had taken their toll. Thank you, I whispered, placing my hand on his headstone. Thank you for seeing me, for treating me like I mattered, for teaching me that kindness isn't weakness, and that dignity isn't something you earn. It's something you give and receive. The sun broke through the clouds, warming my face. I hope Eleanor is taking good care of you up there, and I hope you're proud of me. I'm trying to honor your legacy, Mr. Henderson. Not with marble monuments or fancy buildings, but by lifting up other women like me, by showing them that their work has value, that they have value. I picked up my purse and turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. I still make my coffee in a blue mug every morning. 2 sugars, a splash of cream, just the way you liked it. Some habits are worth keeping. My name is Keisha Williams, and this is my story. For 20 years, I was invisible, just another maid cleaning another house. But one man saw me, really saw me, and he changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. If you're watching this and you're a domestic worker, a housekeeper, a janitor, someone who feels invisible, I see you.
Your work matters. Your life matters. You deserve dignity, respect, and dreams that come true. Don't give up. Keep showing up. Keep being kind even when the world isn't kind. You never know whose life you're changing or who might change yours. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about real women, real struggles, and real triumph. Drop a comment below telling me what part of my journey resonated with you most. And remember, you are seen. You are valued. You are more worth than $12 an hour. Thank you for listening to my story, and thank you, Mr. Henderson, wherever you are, for teaching me that love and kindness are the greatest inheritance of all.